He knows what his players need to do. He knows what his players can do and can't do. But one area of concern Kinoshi has to look at is the defending of set plays. Because it is pretty concerning that when an opposing player who is shorter than their three tallest players could time his jump to perfection to head home. And the protection for Kalamula when he was exposed was also pretty evident. Inconsistency, that is the theme of Selangor's 2025-26 season so far. One moment their performances could be brilliant and heroic, like how they thrashed Terengganu in the Malaysian Super League and, more notably, hold Buriram United to a 1-1 draw away in the opening ASEAN Club Championship Shopee Cup. And yet at another moment, they could be so fragile that they could lose quite easily against opponents that they were at least expected to either hold to a draw or better. Take Negeri Sembilan earlier this season in the Malaysian Super League, and crucially this evening in the AFC Champions League 2 group stage opener, where they lost 2-4 at home to another Thai club, Bangkok United, at the Petaling Jaya Stadium this evening. And what gives? Because it's not like Kazuhito Kinoshi is chopping and changing his personnel, nor throwing away all the various playbooks and dishing out random tactics in every game. No. The Japanese had largely fielded an almost similar lineup for every game in every competition thus far, making a few changes as is often the norm when it comes to being involved in various competitions, both in the domestic and continental campaigns. But this time round, against Bangkok United, it is clear that Kinoshi wanted to start this game and start their ACL2 campaign at the best possible note when he named what was almost a full string starting 11. Barring one or two changes, where Harif Haikal come in instead of Sharul Nazim on the right side of the back three, and crucially, instead of their captain Faizal Halim, who was on the bench, it was Cape Verdean striker Alvin Fortes who came on to play on the right side of an attacking front three alongside Zach Clough on the left and Brazilian centre forward Chirico. The idea was to use the same usual tactic and utilize home ground advantage to catch one of the front runners in the current Thai League 1 campaign thus far. But obviously, it is pretty evident that Bangkok United under Toch Tawan Sripan had read the script. They knew what Selangor could do. They obviously had studied what Selangor could, what were the problems Selangor could pose, and who were the key players to watch out for, what they could do to stifle Selangor's style of play. And the result, a rather shocking first half where Selangor fell behind 1-3 at the break, and despite pulling one goal back midway in the second half, a late Bangkok goal ensured that the Red Giants will begin yet another Asian club campaign with a defeat. And in what is considered as the group of death in the East Zone, alongside last season's runners-up Singapore champions Lion City Sailors and Indonesian domestic champions Persib Bandung, getting points, especially at home, would be crucial in what is expected to be a tight race from start to finish to determine the two teams to advance into the knockout rounds. And with this defeat, it has provided an early setback in Selangor's continental aspirations as they seek to reach the knockout rounds in Asia for the first time in close to a decade. And despite fielding what is a predictable you can say in attack 3-4-3 or more like a 5-2-3 wingback formation, it was pretty evident that Bangkok had them figured out. Because for much of the first half, Selangor had more possession, but crucially, they were unable to find spaces inside the Bangkok half, let alone in the final third. And every time Selangor tried to counter-attack, because it is pretty evident that the Red Giants, what they wanted to do was to exploit any space Bangkok would have opened up when they tried to attack, to counter and exploit those openings to try and score a quick goal. But the Thai side obviously did not give them this luxury, and you could actually say that Selangor were out-thought, they were out-fought, especially in the first half. And what Kinoshi had in mind, particularly when he started Alvin Fortes, was mainly to utilize the speed to create lightning counter-attacks. That backfired spectacularly too, because whenever Selangor tried to play the ball in the other half, you could see those white shirts plugging those gaps and posing all kinds of questions for Selangor to try and solve. How are they going to break down a rather compact sea of white shirts that are camping in their own half? And crucially, Bangkok had one advantage that Selangor do not have. Because when it comes to the technical level, there was one thing that was very evident from Bangkok United. When it came to having possession in their own half and anticipating the high pressing, the tight pressing method that Selangor would employ whenever they lost possession, what Bangkok did was simply to pass their way out of trouble, and with some skill, because it takes some solid technical fundamentals and a keen awareness of the surroundings and a good sense of direction to pass your way out of trouble and away from the red shirts and exploit them when, as they did 4 times tonight, catching Selangor unaware. And that's how Bangkok managed to score 2 goals by the quarter hour. All it took was a missed tackle from Abou Nadi for their Dutch striker Ilas Al-Haf to break away, shoot, first attempt saved by Kalamula, but unfortunately the ball spilled into his direction, who needed no second invitation to score. Then the second goal, a corner kick, and Mushin Al-Ghassani, he was not the tallest of players inside the box, but he had enough spring, enough direction and accurate positioning to hit the ball at the far post, and that is despite 3 red shirts who are taller, who are stronger than him, trying to keep him out of the way. So it's pretty head scratching in the sense that in spite of those plans, in spite of the practice, in spite of the training, something had not gone to plan for the Red Giants. And it could be down to being caught unawares by the speed of thought in which Bangkok deployed when they had the ball, especially when they transitioned from defense to their own quick counter-attacks. And more often than not, their counter-attacks were quicker, their technique was definitely much sharper than Selangor's, and that is something that all of Kinoshi's coaching could only do so much. Because, like it or not, the players from the visiting side were technically superior compared to those from Selangor, and that I will include a few foreigners in Selangor starting 11. And that left, you can predictably say, those in those red shirts wondering what had gone on. They were pretty puzzled. They were baffled. They were befuddled. What went wrong? What had hit them? And that was despite Selangor actually managing to pull one back midway the first half, where in that rare moment where Kinoshi's tactics work as intended, Quentin Cheng bombarding down the right, pulling in the low cross, and all Chirigo needed to do was to evade past the sea of white shirts with the simplest of the finishes to just smash home. Job done. But that was as good as Selangor got for much of the first half. And just as we thought that Selangor would have some hope of salvaging something from the game, it took less than 60 seconds for that 2-goal deficit to be restored. Richmond Ankra, whose deflection of our half's attempt following a quick counter down the right again was sufficient to lob beyond the reach of Kalamula and into the back of the net. So much for pulling one back. Bangkok appeared to give the message that you can score one, but we have enough in the tank to score more than you. That was the message Tawan Sripan and his coaching staff and his players were sending to Selangor and their rather stunned crowd, those who came early to brave the hot evening heat at the Petaling Jaya Stadium. I know 6 p.m. is not the usual kickoff, but still, it's no excuse for Selangor to be half asleep in defense and wait for the floodlights to come on before they start playing. It sounds rather ridiculous to say, but all those plans were smashed due to that half asleep moments they had in defense. Whether it was reacting to counter-attacks or in defending set plays, it had proved to be a massive problem. And while Quentin was one of the few to have a good game, the left wing back Kevin Diroram had a much less memorable game when he came up against those opponents he used to face in the Thai League before transferring to Selangor this season. He was quite quiet at the other side of the pitch because Bangkok definitely had him read. They knew him from his playing days in the Thai League, and whatever he tried to do, they seemed to have an answer for him. And that left Selangor quite handicapped on one side of the pitch. There was nothing Zach Clough could do when his usual supporting act was cut off, was kept quiet. Then you had Alvin Fortes. His speed was meant to cause some problems, but the only contribution the Cape Verdean could do in the first 45 minutes was to launch a quick cross after bursting through down the right, which was easily caught by Thai national team goalkeeper Patiwat Kamai. Pretty easy for him. The surprise factor was long gone. Alvin Fortes was not as effective as intended, and unsurprisingly, he was the first one to be sacrificed when Faisal took over his place after the break. And despite that change, it was still pretty evident that Selangor had a lot of work to do. And their task, already 2 goals down, 1-3, it was made even worse when Harith Haikal was shown a straight red 6 minutes before the end of the first half for a very clumsy, high-footed challenge from behind on Sia Kunori outside the box. It was rather stupid. I know he was in a mad rush in a mad rush to reclaim the ball, but Kunori was much faster than him. So Harif, who was the savior for Selangor in Buriram with his last-ditch header off the goal line in injury time last month, was the villain this time. Instead of using his head to try and see what he could do, perhaps really out of desperation, he stuck his foot out in mid-air high enough to clatter the former Tampines Rovers midfielder down to the ground, and unsurprisingly being the last man to take down a player for a striker, as the rules of the game indicate, the referee had no alternative but to show the red card. Correct call. You can't dispute about it. That left the task. If going 2 goals down was bad enough, that makes Selangor, put Selangor in a much more difficult predicament. But still, it did not create a, you can say, drastic change, although the wingbacks now had to be more withdrawn in the absence of a third centre back. So it's now, for the rest of the game, is a 4-2-3 formation until late in the game. Faisal Halim come on for the ineffective Fortes, but not much actually. Even though 2 hours after the hour mark, he had that one opportunity to close the gap. Once again, Cheng was the main provider for that move, bursting down the right flank with that pace, with that energy, with that diligence, and putting in that cross that reached Faisal, who had his ball at the back, who had his back of 2 defenders. He had to turn past them and try to create an attempt, which he did. And unlike Kalamula, who found himself floundering, Patiwat was a tower, in a way, a tower in front of the striker, expanding his body size to prevent Faisal from a clear view of goal. It's a bit susah, but the superiority of the Thais clearly showed, and they were so comfortable with their position that they actually loaded in more Thais in their substitutions, taking out among the other imports on the pitch, Kyoga Nakamura and Nebojas Kosovic. And that, despite those changes, the Thais literally were camping in the Selangor half. You can tell that in a way the Thais could have delivered a killer blow, but they chose to tease the Red Giants into a guessing game on where the ball will be going next. And well, in between that, just as they were trying to keep that game going, Selangor had a glimmer of hope in the 73rd minute. Instead of Quentin Cheng, this time it was Chirigor, who was another effective contributor in this game, despite with a goal, but also with his tireless running. And he had to do some work because of the absence of one player, but also initially the ineffectiveness of Alvin Fortes on the flank. So he had to take up quite a bit of the slack, making some runs with the ball on the pitch. And it was this Brazilian's move where he burst down the right, had a shot that was blocked by Patiwat, but the ball landed in the direction of substitute Alif Izan, who made no mistake to smash home the rebound. So it was game on, even if it was for a while. But then Bangkok had other ideas. Again, for some reason, set piece marking appears not to be Selangor's strength in this game. From another corner, this time round it was their centre back Felipe Maya who timed his jump accurately to hit home off a corner to seal 3 points for Bangkok United. And disappointingly for the Red Giants, a defeat to open their latest Asian campaign. And looking at all in, it's pretty clear that Bangkok United are clearly superior to Selangor at all areas of the game. They were more decisive in their possession, in their movement, in their passing, especially their incisive counter-attacks into the final third. They also had the technical ability to play themselves out of tight situations which were created through Selangor's high pressing game, which Selangor persisted for the first half until the sending off by Harif Haikal. And even when Selangor were threatening to take something back late in the game with their second goal, despite being one man down, Bangkok just upped their game, showed them what needed to be done to close off the game for good. And once that fourth goal went in, it's quite evident that there is no more answer for there's no more reply for Selangor. And with that, I wouldn't want to say back to the drawing board for Kinoshi. He knows what his players need to do. He knows what his players can do and can't do. But one area of concern Kinoshi has to look at is the defending of set plays. Because it is pretty concerning that when an opposing player who is shorter than their three tallest players could time his jump to perfection to head home. And the protection for Kalamula when he was exposed was also pretty evident. However, when they're up against tougher opponents, even by a slight level or by certain levels, it's not just your Johor Darul Takzim. They were very gallant and played their own game plan to perfection against Buriram. But for some reason, their game plan against Bangkok United totally tore apart. Because Bangkok was smarter. They played better. And they knew when to turn on and turn off their gear with sufficient depth and strength to hit Selangor and kill off the game for good. And I think these are the main lessons Kazuhito Kinoshi and Selangor have to take away from this very chastening defeat, especially in what was a very overall poor first half where they had no answers to what Bangkok threw at them on both ends of the pitch.